Hockey doesn't have enough hockey fans. Now, I don't mean fans of individual teams. For example, I grew up in West Central Pennsylvania with tons of Penguins fans. Crucially, these people were not hockey fans. Once the Pens were done, the NHL ceased to exist for many of these folks. That's the case for almost every market around the league, especially in the US. People root for their team, and that's it. My channel is geared toward people like myself, hockey fans. People who love and want to learn about the sport no matter the team. Now, I get that evolving from a fan of a team to a fan of a sport can be daunting. There's a lot of guys to learn. So to start you off, I've compiled one guy from every team that I think is interesting and you might not be super aware of if you just watch one team. If you're already a league-wide fan, as many of my subs are, don't click away. These guys aren't going to be your Sidney Crosbys and Connor McDavids. These are guys you've heard of, but you aren't necessarily too familiar with their game, what they're good at, bad at, or how they succeed, or if they're struggling, could succeed. Writing this certainly taught me a lot about these players, so I hope the video will do the same for you. So without any further ado, let's start with the Western Conference. Anaheim, Jackson LaCombe, defenseman.
And now Jackson LaCombe. LaCombe with a shot, he scores!
You look at Jackson LaCombe's counting stats and you see a very good 24-year-old defenseman. Probably one of those, well, we'd rather he wasn't our number one, but he'd be a great 2 or 3 kind of guys. You look at his underlying numbers and you see, okay, basically the only time the terrible Ducks weren't completely underwater at 5-on-5 was when he was on the ice. His shooting percentage is probably too high to be sustainable, but he's a good defender and penalty killer too. He's a bona fide number 1, or at least he was in 2025. Then you look at his tracking stats from all 3 zones and you say, holy shit, who is this guy? He's a complete and utter monster in transition, one of the most effective players in the league at creating and blowing up plays in the neutral zone. He can lug the puck, he can pass the puck, and he has a good stick to break up plays. This is a special player that I feel like many people haven't even thought about. I'm no scout, but I took the time to watch the guy play a little, and something I love about his game is his patience with the puck. He's never afraid to just hold on to it and not force a pass or blast a low-quality shot on net. He'll get the puck, look like he's going to pass, doesn't, everyone collapses on him, and then he snaps a pass across the ice to a wide-open man. His 10% shooting percentage won't last. That's Cale Makar level, and I don't think he's Cale Makar. But LaCombe is way more than a random 24-year-old that went on a PDO bender. There is a ton to love about this guy's game. I don't think he turns into a generational defenseman or anything, but now that he has a good coach and his team is heading toward competent, I could see him becoming a guy that gets some Norris votes as soon as next year. He's very, very good. Calgary, Joel Farabee, forward.
It's a bat, Farabee shoots, scores!
Do not drag Joel Farabee out into the streets just yet, Flames fans. And I'll give you a few sets of numbers that should really give you hope. According to all 3 zones and JFresh, Farabee was 84th percentile in chances and 27th percentile in goals. He was 91st percentile in chance assists and 28th percentile in primary assists. He's not scoring on his chances, and neither are his line mates. We are either looking at the absolute worst finisher in the league, or, folks, we're looking at maybe the most unlucky man in the NHL. Among full-time NHLers on the Flames, Farabee was behind only Blake Coleman in 5-on-5 expected goals share at 52.2%. For those of you who don't know, expected goals is a metric that gives a value to each shot attempt on the ice. This value is determined by how close the shot is, the shot type, whether it's off a rebound, and various other factors. So Farabee is doing well in the theoretical. In terms of actual goals, he was dead last on the Flames with a 40% on-ice goal share. That is what a 4.6% on-ice shooting percentage will do for you. I'm not saying that Farabee is completely innocent regarding his nightmare season. Line-wide finishing problems have been following Farabee for years now, and actual goals matter a hell of a lot more than expected goals. But I do think it'd be interesting to see him with a legit finisher like Matthew Coronato, a guy he basically didn't play with at all in 2025, and an archetype he's basically never played with in his career. Notice I haven't mentioned the guy's defense. It stinks. That's not changing. And that can be fine for a top 6 guy. Just before the Flames declare decidedly that this guy sucks, I'd like to see him in a situation that really makes the most of his abilities as a play driver and hides his deficiencies as a finisher. Chicago, Spencer Knight, goaltender.
He fired out the pad. Another shot stopped with the other pad. Del Mastro gets the rebound. 2 chances, Kempe, and 2 saves by Spencer Knight.
After missing part of 2023 and nearly all of 2024 to battle obsessive-compulsive disorder, Spencer Knight returned to the NHL with a strong showing in 2025 and a trade to the Blackhawks which finally will give him a chance as a number 1 in the NHL. Knight is more than his diagnosis, but he is far from the first NHL player to talk about struggling with OCD. This isn't the fun, oh man, I have to make sure my dishes are done before I go to bed OCD that's often portrayed in media. It can be utterly crippling as your mind is bombarding you with unwanted repetitive thoughts. Knight is an inspiration to me and many others for taking time to address his mental health and raise awareness in a profession where intense ritual and perfectionism are often seen as empirical positives. While those traits can make you a better professional athlete, they can also crush you internally. Clint Malarchuk, Connor Ingram, and Corey Hirsch are all former NHL goalies that have fought a similar fight to Spencer Knight. When I read Corey Hirsch's Players Tribune article as a teenager, it greatly helped me feel less alone in my own mental health journey. And I hope seeing Spencer Knight return and speak openly on the subject does that for someone else struggling. I will eternally root for Spencer Knight, and on top of that, the guy is a good goalie. He was picked 13th in 2019 for a reason. Last season among goalies with at least 30 games played, Knight was dead even with Jake Ottinger in goals saved above expected per 60, while sitting ahead of Sergei Bobrovsky, Jordan Binnington, and Jacob Markstrom. The sample size is small, and Chicago looks like they're planning to remain horrible next year, but I really do think they have their solution in goal. Colorado, Martin Necas, forward.
And a stretch pass, Necas alone, breakaway, scores!
Since I talked about him in a video almost nobody watched, Martin Necas has ascended even further into stardom. He has all the tools to be a consistent 80 or even 90-point guy in the NHL. While I'm not sure he'll ever be as good as the man the Avs traded to get him, Mikko Rantanen, he's relatively cheap at least for next season, giving Colorado more flexibility with their already top-heavy roster. Here's the thing though. Yes, the Avalanche traded the best player in the deal with Carolina, but there's a good chance Necas actually works better with McKinnon than Rantanen did. That sounds insane to say, and the sample size is small, but let's do a comparison here. Alongside McKinnon and Lehkonen, the most common line for both Rantanen and Necas on the Avs last season, Rantanen boasted a 53.8 expected goals share and a 55.6 actual goals share. Necas boasted an astounding 67.7% expected goals share and an even more astounding 76.5 actual goals share. Rantanen and McKinnon haven't had results even close to that since before they won the Cup, and that was with Gabe Landeskog on their wing, who, no offense to Lehkonen, is better than Arturi Lehkonen. Why is this? Because Necas plays fast. Now, I wouldn't call Rantanen slow, but he's much more of a methodical player. He holds the puck, he draws people in. When he was with the Avs, he let Nate carry the puck, and then he punched the clock once it entered the offensive zone. With Necas, who is also a demon in transition, McKinnon has somebody that plays at his pace. They're probably the fastest duo in the NHL right now. Oh, and might I mention Cale Makar and Devon Taves are almost always on the ice with them. There is not a line in the NHL right now that can keep up with the speed of this Avs top line. Necas is like a baby McKinnon. He isn't the bulldog that Nate is, but like Nate, Marty has an elite shot and elite passing ability. The passing ability allows this line not just to work on the rush, but in the cycle as well, thanks in part to Lehkonen's digging ability. The Avs have some depth issues, but I think even without Rantanen, Necas makes their top line as good as ever. Dallas, Esa Lindell, defenseman.
Set it up, shot, Lindell scores!
Esa Lindell has been the other defenseman on the Stars since joining the team almost a decade ago. First behind John Klingberg, then Miro Heiskanen, and now add Thomas Harley to the list. The casual view of Lindell is the secondary shutdown guy. I'm sure many Stars fans and people more in the know can see that Lindell is also a valuable contributor on the offensive side too. But there is one thing he really excels at: long passes. Come on, man, you can't expect me to care about that. Hear me out. We think of puck-moving defensemen as guys that can really carry the mail, but really, the most efficient way to move the puck up the ice is to pass it. Lindell's ability to gather up a loose puck in the D-zone and then just whip it across two lines to put his team on the attack is nearly unmatched. He's not a speedster, he doesn't have tremendous small game skill, he's just a quarterback in the D-zone. Not in the way a power play quarterback is, but like a literal quarterback, sitting patiently, watching coverages develop, and hitting his guy in stride. A guy who can A, shut down the opposition's top players, and B, snap your team immediately onto the attack is extremely valuable beyond the score sheet. He's not a classic shutdown guy either. In fact, in terms of expected goals, he doesn't look that impressive, even boasting a sub 50% XG share at 5-on-5 last season. But especially over the past few years, he's consistently outperformed the theoretical, boasting a 59.5% share in actual goals last year. He bends but doesn't break, then bang, here comes Wyatt Johnston or Rope Hintz hurtling toward the opposition's net. I'll just tell you what any Stars fan could have already told you. Esa Lindell is critical to this team's success. Edmonton, Vasily Podkolzin, forward.
They're making him work now. Arvidsson to Podkolzin, shoots and scores!
When watching the Oilers in the playoffs last spring, I was drawn to one man, Vasily Podkolzin. Podkolzin is Leon's guy. Draisaitl doesn't have absolutely blazing speed like McDavid, but he's plenty fast, and he plays fast. He needs a guy that can keep up. Podkolzin is a burner. He can keep up with Leon on the rush and get some high-danger scoring chances. We'll touch back on that. He's a killer on the forecheck. He has a little Brandon Tanev in him with more size and higher offensive ceiling. Now, Brandon Tanev is a great bottom sixer, but you don't want a clone of him being your best option to play with your top 5 player in the world center. And that brings us back to the scoring chances. Podkolzin, much like many of the Oilers' top 6 wingers before him, cannot finish. He's 76th percentile in chances, 20th percentile in goals. Leon is setting him up, Vasily can't put him home. There's some reason to believe his finishing can regress. I don't think he's going to end up a career 7% shooter. He may not get up to that 12.2 mark he had in his rookie season consistently, but if he's a 10% shooter, he can start sniffing the 15 or even 20 goal mark. And this needs to happen because he also doesn't pass, at least not very effectively. This is a guy with a lot of tools that I like, mainly the blazing speed, but I think next year is probably his shit or get off the pot season on Leon's wing. Does he get improved by Mangiapane or Howard, or does he get pushed out by one or both of them? That's the question for me going into the season. Los Angeles, Kevin Fiala, forward.
Fiala, curl and drag, shoot, scores!
I'm old enough to remember the shock and awe surrounding the Mikael Granlund for Kevin Fiala trade in 2019. How could this moron Paul Fenton trade a guy as good as Mikael Granlund for a struggling 22-year-old winger? In hindsight, things look much better for the short-lived tenure of Fenton. Fiala became a star alongside Kirill Kaprizov on the Wild's high-event top line before cap struggles forced Minnesota to deal the Swiss scorer to LA for a king's ransom. Pun not intended. Well, I'm sure the Kings would love to have Brock Faber instead of, Cody Ceci. Fiala, despite lower point totals in silver and black, has actually been an even better player in LA than he was in Minnesota, and he showed that once again last season. Fiala, in my mind, is the perfect second-line winger. That doesn't mean he wouldn't be a tremendous first-line winger. I mean that in the same way people say Sidney Crosby is the best third-line center of all time. It's the player archetype and what they can do in that role. Fiala is at his best when he's conducting a line, which he really got the chance to do once the Kings added Andrei Kuzmenko at the trade deadline, which firmly put Fiala with Quinton Byfield and Alex Laferriere. Two guys, like Fiala, who are exceptional at getting the puck in the defensive zone and going the other way with speed. When combined with Fiala's preternatural ability to fly the zone at the perfect time, this makes for an extremely dangerous rush attack. While that's all well and good, Fiala's in-zone ability is on display on the power play, where he was tacked onto the top line, playing the point for Kopitar, Kempe, Kuzmenko, leading the Kings in power play goals with 14, double Adrian Kempe's second-place total of 7. Here's my hot take with Fiala. I think he's better than Adrian Kempe. I think Fiala is better in transition, and I think he's a better passer, while Kempe is a very strong penalty killer to go with a top-tier shot. Here's the separating factor for me. Fiala and Kempe were tied last season with 35 goals to lead the Kings. Kempe did that with a great facilitator in Anze Kopitar. Fiala did that while being the facilitator. When the two were on the ice at the same time, on the power play, Fiala vastly outscored Kempe. I'm not by any means saying Kempe is bad, but what I am saying is, when the NHL puts out their list of top 20 wingers in the league that's designed to make you mad, I want to hear less of, why is Kempe at number 20, and more, where's Fiala? Minnesota, Brock Faber, defenseman.
Pettersson, here's a chance for Faber, early scores! Connor Garland came back to break things.
Two things can be true. Brock Faber is an excellent hockey player. Brock Faber has horrific underlying numbers. Jonas Brodin is one of the best shutdown defensemen of his generation. He's Jacob Slavin level, just without the offense. He and Faber had a 47.5 XG share and a 42.9 actual goal share at 5-on-5. By my count, that XG share is the worst from a Brodin pair since 2016. By far his worst season. Yes, for those of you keeping track at home, that means Brock Faber was worse with Brodin than 2023 we gotta get this guy the hell out of here Matt Dumba. Harder assignment, sure, but that is not a good sign. Faber was better with Jacob Middleton, getting over a 50% actual goal share, but the underlyings still weren't there. The Wild had the third worst penalty kill in the league. Faber was out there on the PK every other shift. Now, am I a Brock Faber hater or skeptic? Absolutely not. But I do think as of right now, he's a guy being asked to do too much. He looked spectacular at the Four Nations tournament, playing a shutdown role with Jacob Slavin on Team USA. This is a very good player with great tools, and I absolutely think he has the potential to be what the Wild see him as. But he's not there yet. I do think Zeev Buium joining this team is the best possible thing for Faber. Buium is a left shot, which means he will probably end up with Spurgeon eventually, and will give the Wild more flexibility with their minutes as opposed to loading them all on Faber. Look for his underlyings to improve next season as he develops and gets a slightly easier role. If they don't show signs of improvement, we can talk. But until then, I wouldn't get too concerned. Nashville, Steven Stamkos, forward.
Gets a return pass, throws it across, Stamkos scores! Again, high to the glove side pass.
I think there is still some value Steven Stamkos can bring to the table, but he needs to be put in very specific circumstances to succeed because all he can do anymore is shoot. He needs to be with someone who can carry the puck, someone who can forecheck, someone who can set him up, and someone that can play defense. Even putting Stamkos with Filip Forsberg last season wasn't enough. He needs a perfect situation. 2024 with Brandon Hagel and Anthony Cirelli was about as good as it was going to get in terms of line mates for Stammer, and that made him playable at 5-on-5. At least that's what I thought before I looked. Oh, Nashville's bad, Stamkos just needs the right line mates. That's why he was so blah last year. No. He was horrible possession-wise at 5-on-5, even with Hagel and Cirelli, or Kucherov and Point. His first 30 games with Nashville, you know how many goals he scored at even strength? 1. There are a lot of good players that, while not speedsters, play fast. Stamkos is the opposite. He can still skate, but he doesn't really do that much with it. All he can do is shoot and play some in-zone offense. He is actually, somehow, so good at in-zone offense and on the power play that he's still a pretty sizable net positive. The guy can still rip it, but he's screaming toward Daniel Sprong, Jacob Vrana territory. Two guys that are close to washing out of the league. Actually, while I'm recording voiceover, Jacob Vrana did wash out of the league. Stammer is nearing fourth liner that can't kill penalties territory. I said there's still a place for him in the NHL, but that place is in that all he's going to do is play on the power play role, which is obviously not what the Preds got him to do, and a role that a lot of teams aren't even willing to give anyone. He's like forward Marc-Andre Bergeron right now. He'll still score, but that's unfortunately it unless he majorly changes his game, which I do think is possible. He's only going into his age 35 season. He can still motor. He still cares. I would love to see him adjust to become a low-event sniper like an Eeli Tolvanen type. It's not flashy, but I think it could help him extend his career. San Jose, William Eklund, forward.
Eklund from the angle, centered it in front, and they score!
Among all of the young talent the Sharks have on their roster, I feel like William Eklund gets forgotten the most, at least by national coverage. But he's now finished second on his team in points 2 years in a row. He's an assist machine. Not just assists, but primary assists. His 41 total assists last season were a tremendous mark for a 22-year-old and had him tied for 56th in the league with JJ Peterka. But even more impressive were his 28 primary assists, which tied him for 30th in the league. That's ahead of Stützle, Barkov, Eichel, and Panarin. Eklund fits perfectly with San Jose's version of that 70s line with Celebrini and Toffoli, and while he isn't the potentially generational talent that Celebrini is, Eklund has nearly unmatched hockey sense. The number of successful passes he makes where you go, how did he see that guy, is astounding. I think people know how good Celebrini is and how good Toffoli is as a star complement, but Eklund is genuinely a Harlem Globetrotter out there. Oh, and he's a very solid penalty killer and defensive wing. His shot isn't anything special, but it's solid enough that he can score some goals. If he goes out next year and puts up 20, 50, 70 with great defensive impacts and a few shorthanded points, I would not be at all surprised. It was like he was built in a lab to be the perfect sidekick to a star center. Connor Bedard stares at Macklin Celebrini with envy. Seattle, Vince Dunn, defenseman.
Dunn, able to control, with a drive, score!
I will restrain myself from talking about the inevitable popping of the Chandler Stevenson bubble because I'm trying to be kind, so I'll talk about a guy I've always really liked, Vince Dunn. Dunn, as many of my favorites are, is a great skater, While not incredibly fast, he moves around the ice well and has always been a very solid puck-moving defenseman. He's also a pretty dynamic offensive defenseman, bringing a ton of value with his shot and passing ability. Sounds perfect, right? Not exactly. Dunn and his long-term partner Adam Larsson were horrible defensively last season. Like, 5 worst defensive pairs in the league horrible. They were in Lane Hudson, Tony DeAngelo land, which is not where you want to be when you don't have the puck. Now, my hypothesis is that this is on Adam Larsson. Adam Larsson is a black hole offensively, and now he can't defend to the point where he's dragging Dunn down, or at the very least, not lifting him up like he did a couple years ago. The problem is, I can't really prove that statistically. Both Dom Luszczyszyn and Top Down Hockey's models pin a lot of the defensive liability on Dunn, and they would know better than me, just catching a vibe, but I will raise some questions here. See, Dunn and Larsson were one of the NHL's most inseparable pairings. Despite Dunn missing 20 games, they still played the 14th most minutes together of any D pair in the NHL, so we don't really get to see what either player, Dunn especially, looked like with another partner. But what we did see doesn't exactly help my theory. Basically, the only other person Larsson played with was Ryker Evans, whose expected goal share didn't change with Larsson, but his actual goal share somewhat dramatically improved from a horrific 38.1% with Montour to 45.8% with Larsson. The only other person Dunn played significant time with was Brandon Montour, who saw his XG share raised with Dunn as opposed to Evans, but his actual goal share stay the same. Again, actual goals matter more than theoretical goals, which is why the models are giving Larsson the edge here. But actual goals are also a little more finicky, a little more inconsistent than expected goals. I still think, under the surface, if Vince Dunn were to get a different, more solid partner, he would show that he is better defensively than his brutal numbers last season alluded to. Who did Seattle add on the blue line? Ryan Lindgren, eh? Well, that's not going to do it. Good luck, Vince. St. Louis, Oskar Sundqvist, forward.
Goal line in front. Sundqvist shoots. He scores! Sundqvist!
There isn't a player in the league better at doing absolutely nothing than Oskar Sundqvist. He doesn't score, he doesn't pass, he doesn't shoot, he doesn't carry the puck, he's not fast, he doesn't really even forecheck. He hits, that's about it. But on the other side of the coin, he doesn't allow many shots, he doesn't allow many goals, he doesn't let opposing offenses get going. Oskar Sundqvist does nothing. His line mates Zach Bolduc and Matthew Joseph were out running around, but there's Sundqvist, just plodding along, buying time, while Thomas and Kyrou rest. The Blues did this with both of their bottom lines. Toropchenko, Fox, and Walker were masterful time wasters, but Sundqvist stuck out to me even among those guys. Toropchenko and Walker are like rockets on the ice, just screaming around as fast as they can and slamming into people. Foxa is more involved on the forecheck and shoots more than the towering Swede. But Sonny is just out there, like a lost giraffe that isn't all too interested in making his way back home. And let me tell you, I think that is absolutely perfect performance for a depth center. You're not there to pitch in. You're there to give the big guns a breather. And the Blues had some serious punch in their top six. Now, is Sundqvist probably underqualified for the third-ish line role he had last season? Sure. But if I could spend $1 million to get a guy like him to center my fourth line, I absolutely would. Utah, Karel Vejmelka, goaltender.
Steals, plays it on. Oh, Vejmelka kept it up, but that was close.
Mackenzie Blackwood bounces back after stinking, and everybody's like, oh, Mac's back, baby. But when Karel Vejmelka does it, nobody cares. Vejmelka has had a strange career arc. Quite bad as an old rookie, quietly really good as a sophomore, then bad again, losing his job to Connor Ingram, then quietly really good again last season, taking his job back from Connor Ingram. To touch back to Blackwood, Vejmelka actually saved more goals above expected than the Avs' solution in goal. And while the Avs are seen as this team having solved their goaltending troubles, which, they only really needed somebody better than Georgiev, so anyone, people look at the Mammoth starter and think, really? This guy? Are we sure? Now, do I see Vejmelka as a top tier or even second tier starter? Not really, but I think we can put him in that Joey Decord, Aiden Hill category of guys you can be somewhat confident in. The problem with Vejmelka seems to be his consistency, not just year to year, but game to game. While he plays plenty of games where he looks terrific, he also has some really terrible outings. In his last 11 starts of last season, the Mammoth netminder had 2 games where he had over a .970 save percentage and 2 games where he was under .700. But if I'm Utah, and I'm nearing the playoffs for the first time, I'd rather have a guy who can steal a series than a guy who's just going to give you a chance every night. If Utah gets in next year, I wouldn't be shocked to see Vejmelka halak some team. Vancouver. Marcus Pettersson, defenseman.
Crotty's in. Here's Marcus Pettersson. He scores!
With Elias Pettersson careening into mediocrity and Elias Pettersson still trying to break into the league on a full-time basis, let's talk about Vancouver's newest Pettersson, Marcus. Marcus Pettersson has made his money in the National Hockey League as one of the league's best babysitters. He's spent most of his prime with the likes of Chris Letang, Erik Karlsson, and Justin Schultz, serving as their more defensively minded anchor. That is all true, but that isn't the real value of Marcus Pettersson. Canucks fans, you know how Quinn Hughes was never fully unlocked until they stopped putting him with defensive shutdown guys and instead paired him with a guy that can actually play off of him in Filip Hronek? Marcus Pettersson is another Filip Hronek. Classically, the star defenseman's partner becomes a passenger the second the puck hits the neutral zone, but that essentially puts the team down a man once they get into the offensive zone. Pettersson, like Hronek, is in that new mode of elite partner, a guy who can really contribute in the offensive zone and not just watch over a star defenseman, but actively make them better. Pettersson can pass, skate, and shoot, not at a typical power play quarterback's level, but well enough to never slow an offense down. He also isn't afraid to be the guy on his pair that takes a beating, going back for pucks in the D zone, blocking shots, or contesting a zone entry. The only problem I see here for the Canucks, they only have one Quinn Hughes, and he is both left-handed, like Pettersson, and already has a partner. That means Pettersson has to play with the plodding Tyler Myers. That pairing has worked well enough as a shutdown pair, but the Canucks are not getting the maximum value out of Pettersson in that role. The guy is at his best as a star complement, but since he's signed long-term in Vancouver, I fear he's locked into a life as a very sound shutdown defenseman. There's nothing wrong with that, but he has so much more to offer. Vegas. Pavel Dorofeyev, forward.
Anderson late in the second. Here's Dorofeyev, scored the last Vegas goal. And with a backhand shot, he scores! Oh my!
Among the many Golden Knights that gave huge surplus value contract-wise last season, Pavel Dorofeyev was probably the most eye-catching. Despite only making $1.8 million, Dorofeyev netted 35 goals, more than his career point total heading into the season. He and Tomas Hertl were inseparable last year, which shouldn't make sense. These are two guys that both love to shoot. Often their other winger was Brandon Saad or Victor Olofsson, two more guys that love to shoot. This line works because there isn't a single guy that you know is going to defer. Since teams have to respect the shot of Hertl, Dorofeyev can just fade through defensive coverages, and he has a terrific release once he gets the puck. His ability to catch and shoot, combined with his elusiveness off the puck, reminds me a lot of Jake Gensel. While I don't think Dorofeyev will ever be the individual play driver that Gensel is, he has the tools right now to score 40 goals in this league. Usually, when a mid-round pick comes essentially out of nowhere and scores that many goals in his age 24 season, he's on a shooting percentage bender. Nope, not Dorofeyev. He shot a perfectly sustainable 13.8%. I frankly wonder with his shooting talent if he could start knocking on the door of 15%. This is not a one-hit wonder. This kid is very smart and very good. Winnipeg, Dylan Samberg, defenseman.
Kyle Connor walks it out. Samberg, shot, tip, score.
A little while ago, when I saw Dylan Samberg re-signed with the Jets for 3 years at $5.75 million per, I thought, wow, that seems like a lot of money. I went down into the comments of the post which had broken the news to me and saw many people with the same idea saying, wholly overpay and things of that ilk. But then I saw the army of Jets fans. You do not understand how good this guy is, they all said. Really? We're talking about the same Dylan Samberg, right? Then I looked. They were right. I didn't know how good this guy was. I will list all of the defensemen ahead of Dylan Samberg in on-ice actual goal share at 5-on-5. Caden Korczak had a really nice season but was extremely sheltered and only played 40 games. Jordan Spence, another guy who killed it in super sheltered minutes. Philip Broberg, incredible breakout season, looks like he could be a legit number one. Chris Tanev, probably the best pure defensive defenseman in the league. Thomas Harley, elite talent level, but shielded from the toughest matchups by Miro. Braden McNabb, another candidate for the best pure defensive defenseman in the league. That's it. That's the list. And Samberg didn't have an especially easy assignment on the Jets' second pair either. I'm not saying this makes Samberg better than guys he's ahead of, like Makar, Hughes, Werenski, or even like Gus Forsling. But these results are incredible. Now, since we're talking real goals, how much of that goal share is MVP Connor Hellebuyck behind him? Some of it, certainly, which is why we can look to expected goals and see he's 35th in expected goal share. Set the parameters to cut out partial seasons and the extremely sheltered, and he jumps to 25th. Samberg finds these results by being a true two-way defenseman. He isn't spectacular offensively, he isn't spectacular defensively, but combining the two gets him some really good results. He doesn't shoot much, which probably helps limit offensive zone turnovers, and he's a strong passer and solid skater for his size. Samberg is not only worth $5.75 million a year, Dom's model priced his last season at $9.1 million. This is a extremely good player, and with the cap rising, he's going to be a steal. So those are my interesting players for the Western Conference. Let me know in the comments what you learned or who you were excited to see. Thank you guys for watching, and the Eastern Conference video will be out soon. Bye-bye.